All right, well, it is 4:02, so I think it'd be time for us to get underway. Perhaps some more of our members will join us as we're en route here, but with that, I'd like to begin by welcoming everybody for this special joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council for 4 p.m. on June 14th, 2022. And having called to order, I'll ask our Deputy City Clerk if we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Savage.
Here.
Commissioner Murphy. Show Commissioner Murphy is absent. Commissioner Moore. Show her is absent. Vice Chair Hancock.
Present.
And Chair Lemus. Show is absent. We'll show Councilmember Moore is absent. Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Sparks.
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Here.
Mayor Landman.
And here, thank you. And we'll take just a second to ask the city manager if you'd introduce the staff that are present tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and commission. So tonight we have myself, Damian Ovid, city manager. We also have Noah Hausch, director of community development, here with us tonight. And also, of course, our city attorney, who we saw earlier tonight, John Walker, Kevin Patterson, our deputy city clerk. And then we do have some consultants here with us as well. From Four Leaf, we have Luke Lindenbush and Jane Riley and Emily Ham on the line as well. That's the mayor.
Excellent, thank you for that.
And
So
JP shows us here too.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Ford. All right. So with that, let's start tonight by getting some public comment. I'd like to open this to public comment and see if we have anybody that'd like to give some comments to help guide our discussion tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
Perfect. All right. So that brings us to our study session tonight. And I would like to ask our presenters to do their best to tread that fine line between covering this important information thoroughly, but also keeping this short so we have plenty of time to have adequate back and forth of this, because we do have a follow-up meeting at 6 o'clock that half this group has to be to. So with that, I'll pass this to staff and ask for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. This is Noah Hausch, Community Development Director here in the city. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Commissioner Murphy did let me know she had a work emergency, so she's not going to be in attendance, and Commissioner Moore also was planned to be absent. I have not heard from the chair, Lemus. But I would really want to just thank everyone for the last couple of years worth of effort. It's worth identifying that this has been a multi-year process, and today is kind of the winding down of that public engagement effort, which really started with the in late 2019 with the Housing Methodology Committee that I served on as a part of the ABAG MTC process to allocate our arena. We've been really working collaboratively with planners throughout the county on trying to come up with some programs and policies that are consistent across the county, but also focused on the needs of the community here in Cotati. We've done tabling at events, we've done online surveys, we've hosted meetings, we've been out in the community, even the last couple of farmers markets. And we had a meeting with the Planning Commission, the City Council in February to get input. And so this is kind of the culmination of all those efforts, which have taken that input and combined with some of the new recent state legislation and come to inform these draft policies and programs that are going to be presented by Luke Lindenbush and Emily Ham from Four Leaf. And then Jane Riley is here as well to assist with anything else that's needed. And we're here to take some additional feedback and listen to the discussion this evening and further sharpen those policies and programs to better fit the needs of Cotati. And then we'll come back in late summer with the draft public review. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Luke and Emily to take us away.
Thank you very much, Noah. As Noah mentioned, this is really focused this evening on the policies and programs of the housing element. These are components of the draft housing strategy. And we're also going to be going into the affirmatively furthering fair housing, which has been a major component of the 6th cycle housing element update as well. So next slide, please. Yeah, so really going into the goals, policies, and programs, as I'd mentioned, really focusing in on the new and revised programs. There are a lot that are continuing. Really, the emphasis on the word update in housing element update, and a lot of what you see here is carried over from the 5th cycle. There was a lot that was good there and worth carrying over. Emily will be covering the affirmatively furthering fair housing section and how that's going to be featuring in the administrative housing element draft that's going to be released later this summer. And then we're going to be outlining next steps and going into discussion as well. Next slide. So really the draft housing strategy comes down to the policies and goals, policies, and programs on the sites, which will be addressed by the City Council later on this evening as well. But for now, we're going to be going into the goals, policies, and programs. Next slide, please. So looking at the prior goals and the new goals, there's some that is quite different here. And for the most part, this is really just carried over with a little bit more clarity. We found that the prior goals didn't really need to be restructured too much. Everything pretty much made sense in terms of how it was laid out, but just gave new titles to the goals to provide a little bit more clarity and a little bit more brevity in referencing the goals of the city. So those have been restructured as resilient and safe housing. That's the only one that's actually combined of two, which combines prior goals H1 and H6. Or H1 and H5 rather, due to the fact that a lot of the energy efficiency and conservation goals were already completed by the city in the last cycle. So conservation and sustainability are still featured there, but just consolidated under the goal of resilient and safe housing. We also have housing production, affordable, attainable, and accessible housing, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and community engagement as well. Next slide, please. So going into goal number 1, and really just walking through the structure of how each of these programs are laid out. As you see on the column on the left, continuing, most of these are continuing programs, again, putting the update in housing element update. So this was the one that really remained intact. And there are some others that are continuing with substantial modification or others that are absolutely new. So again, we're going to be focusing on the ones that are substantially modified and new, but can field questions on any of them as well. So all of these are continuing. The only one that isn't is the Essential Housing Bond Financing Program, which is focused on the conservation of affordable housing. And you can see in the reason for proposed program column as well that each of these programs are listed in terms of addressing state law, addressing community and stakeholder input through a combination of the surveys that Noah mentioned and the stakeholder meetings that we've been holding over the last couple months. And additionally, some of the programs further in advance RHNA goals, and most of the programs that are within the draft housing strategy cover multiple of these categories. We also thought it was important to indicate funding status, whether these programs would be utilizing funding. And just want to note that this isn't necessarily always funding that's coming from the city itself, but may need to be leveraging other funding sources in order to complete the program. So we'll be going a bit into that as the slides continue. But really this goal is focused on ensuring that affordable housing is safe, that it's accessible to residents of Cotati, and that wherever possible, it's sustainable as well. Next slide, please. Second goal is similar in regard to housing production, but really focused on the production of new units and less to do with the prior goal, which was reformulated from conservation. So again, about half of these are continuing. Some of them are continuing with substantial modification. The streamlining housing development and ADU ones are the main ones that were really overhauled in this cycle. This was because there were a number of laws that were passed in the last 8 years that changed the nature of these programs, but really fit neatly into programs that were continuing. There's one program that's new here, but isn't going to be too much of a change for the city of Cotati, as it is codifying existing policy in the cottage housing ordinance. So that's the new one there. And again, all of these, every single one of these actually furthers and advances RHNA goals, and most of them are addressing state law in the community as well. ADUs is the only one that utilizes funding, and it's a pretty small amount is listed in the program. Next slide, please. Goal number 3 is affordable, attainable, and accessible housing. Again, most of these are continuing. The one that's continuing substantial modification is zoning for a variety of housing types. Similar to the program that streamlines housing development, this is really responsive to changes in state laws and bringing the city up to compliance. The new ones that are listed here were in response to feedback from this body. The first one, co-housing, was expressed as a priority among the council members and commissioners at the February meeting. So we wanted to include that in there to continue Cotati's policy of supporting co-housing in the community. Additionally, there's a program in here for the pro-housing designation. There was some information that was contained in your packet on the pro-housing designation, what it is. So I want to take a moment to address this because it's one of the rare programs in here that doesn't, one of the rare new programs that doesn't explicitly address state law. But this is a program that cities can apply for that allows enhanced access to funding opportunities, not just for housing, but for infrastructure as well. And this is something that has been pursued by a lot of jurisdictions in this housing element update. Because it's increasingly being seen that this is going to be a norm for cities to adopt this in the upcoming housing element cycle. And especially for smaller jurisdictions, it's a way to be able to have access to state funding and really be moved to the front of the line for that. So that's included in there as an option. There's also some information in the packet about the threshold for this. There's a system of points. Out of 69 available, a jurisdiction has to get 30. And I imagine the professors on the call would say that that would normally be failing, but that's a pretty good threshold for passing. But with that being said, this is one that is completely optional. So just wanted to present this to you, and that the program language as it's structured as well isn't really leaving the city on the hook to obtain the pro-housing designation, but just to pursue it, consider it, and adopt it if it's found by the council to be within the city's goals and priorities as well. Moving on to funding under this category, this is one where a number of the programs require funding. We know that the production of affordable housing is not something that's cheap, nor is it free. So all of these are really have to do with utilizing to some extent the city's housing fund in addition to leveraging